Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. A night at the Arts Foundation Gala. The champagne sparkled under the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom as Olivia Pearson surveyed the crowd. The annual Arts Foundation Gala always attracted Seattle's elite. But as the marketing director for a major tech company, networking had become second nature to her. Her emerald silk dress clung to her curves as she navigated through clusters of black ties and evening gowns. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? A deep voice beside her made her turn. The man was tall, with warm brown eyes and dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. His tuxedo fit him impeccably, but there was something in his stance that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable in such formal attire. The architecture enthusiast in me can't help but admire the space more than the people in it, he continued, gesturing toward the ornate ceiling. And here I thought I was the only one people watching, Olivia replied, finding herself instantly drawn to his thoughtful gaze. I'm Olivia Pearson. James Harrington, he said, his handshake lingering a moment longer than necessary. Architect. This venue is one of my favorites in the city, though I rarely have an excuse to visit. Well, James Harrington, architect, she smiled, consider tonight your lucky night. I happen to need a tour guide who can explain the difference between Baroque and Beaux-Arts. They spent the next hour wandering the perimeter of the ballroom, James pointing out architectural details most guests never noticed, while Olivia shared amusing observations about the various attendees. His reserved demeanor gradually relaxed in her presence, and she found his passion for his craft utterly captivating. When the orchestra struck up a waltz, James surprised her by extending his hand. Would you care to dance? On the dance floor, the professional distance between them evaporated. His hand on the small of her back felt both protective and possessive. The scent of his cologne, something woody with hints of cedar, made her lean imperceptibly closer. You're full of surprises, she murmured as he guided her effortlessly through the steps. I wouldn't have pegged you as a dancer. My mother insisted, he replied with a half-smile. Said no son of hers would step on a lady's toes at formal events. Hours later, they found themselves on the hotel's rooftop garden. The city lights sprawled below them like fallen stars. The cool night air raised goosebumps on Olivia's bare shoulders, prompting James to drape his jacket around her. Thank you for rescuing me from endless small talk tonight, she said, turning to face him. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. I think we both know it was the other way around, he replied, his voice lower now. I'm not usually this comfortable with someone I've just met. When his fingers gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, electricity crackled between them. Olivia leaned forward, eliminating the last inches separating them. Their lips met tentatively at first, then with growing urgency. My room is on the 14th floor, she whispered against his mouth. Later, as moonlight filtered through the half-drawn curtains of her hotel suite, Olivia traced lazy patterns on James's bare chest. Their passionate encounter had revealed a fire beneath his composed exterior that had left her breathless. I should go, he said eventually, though he made no move to leave. Or you could stay, she suggested, pressing her lips to his shoulder. I'm not really looking for anything, he started. Olivia placed a finger against his lips. Neither am I, tonight was perfect just as it is. As James dressed to leave at dawn, they exchanged no phone numbers, no promises of tomorrow, just one final searing kiss that left them both certain this would be their first and only night together. How very wrong they would be. 3 months after their unforgettable night, Olivia strode into the conference room at Vantage Tech, her tablet clutched against her chest. As head of marketing, she'd been tasked with overseeing their new headquarters project, a state-of-the-art building that would showcase their company's innovative spirit. She'd reviewed the architectural firm's portfolio but hadn't bothered to check the lead architect's name. When the door opened and James Harrington walked in, she nearly dropped her tablet. His eyes widened in recognition before his professional mask slipped back into place. Miss Pearson, I presume. I'm James Harrington from Meridian Architects. Olivia recovered quickly, extending her hand. Mr. Harrington, what a surprise. Their handshake was brief, but the electric current that passed between them was undeniable. The boardroom suddenly felt several degrees warmer. The meeting proceeded with excruciating professionalism. James presented his initial concepts with the same passion she'd glimpsed that night, speaking about sustainable design and natural light with animated gestures. Olivia found herself watching his hands, remembering how they had moved across her skin. Miss Pearson, your thoughts on the atrium concept? James's voice snapped her back to reality. It's bold, she managed, but I think our team will appreciate the connection to nature. Let's explore it further. After the meeting, as the others filed out, James lingered. The moment they were alone, the air thickened between them. You could have mentioned you'd be working on this project, Olivia said, gathering her notes with deliberate focus. I didn't know myself until yesterday, he replied. When I saw your name on the client brief. It's not a problem, she cut in. We're both professionals. James stepped closer. Olivia, about that night. It was exactly what it was, she finished for him. One perfect night. No expectations. Remember. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment. Relief. She couldn't tell. Right, he nodded. Of course. But as the weeks passed and they were forced into close collaboration, maintaining that professional distance became torturous. Late-night emails evolved into text messages. Coffee meetings to discuss materials turned into lengthy dinners debating design philosophy. Each interaction charged with unspoken tension. One evening, reviewing blueprints in a local cafe, their fingers brushed while reaching for the same document. James pulled back as if burned. This isn't working, he said abruptly. Olivia felt a pang of rejection. The design concept? No, his voice dropped lower. This pretense that we're just colleagues. She set down her pen carefully. What do you suggest then? Because the project will get completed regardless, he finished. But I can't sit across from you day after day pretending I don't remember every detail of that night. Olivia leaned forward, lowering her voice. I thought you wanted it to be a one-time thing. I did, he admitted. My life is complicated. Relationships haven't been my strong suit. Who said anything about a relationship? Olivia surprised herself with her boldness. Maybe we just need to get this out of our system. James's eyes darkened. And then we'll know, she replied simply. Later that night, as they tumbled into her apartment, lips locked and hands frantically removing layers of clothing, both knew they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As Olivia pulled him toward her bedroom, James paused. Are you sure about this? She answered by pulling him back in for another kiss, backing toward her bed. I've never been more sure of anything. As moonlight streamed through her blinds, neither could deny that whatever was happening between them was far more than just physical attraction, and far more complicated than either had anticipated. 2 weeks of secret rendezvous and hasty departures later, Olivia found herself increasingly frustrated with James's emotional withdrawal. Every time they seemed to edge toward something deeper, he pulled back, retreating behind his professional facade. The construction site for Vantage Tech's new headquarters had broken ground, and today marked their first official walkthrough. Olivia watched as James directed his team, pointing out specifications with confident authority. She admired his commanding presence, so different from his gentle touch in private moments. We're still on for the design review tonight, she asked when they had a moment alone. At my office, 8 o'clock, he confirmed, his expression giving nothing away to any observing colleagues. That evening, Olivia arrived at Meridian Architects to find the office deserted except for James, who had spread the latest plans across a conference table. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened, small details that made her heart quicken. They worked side by side for an hour, discussing material choices and sustainability features, until Olivia deliberately placed her hand over his. Why do you always retreat? She asked softly. James stiffened. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do, she turned to face him fully. Every time we get close, you build another wall. I want to understand why. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed, rubbing his face tiredly. 5 years ago, I was engaged, he began, to another architect, Alexandra. We had everything planned. The merger of our firms, a house we designed together, even talked about children. His voice grew distant. Then she got an offer from a prestigious firm in London. She chose her career. And you were devastated, Olivia finished. I threw myself into my work. Safer that way. He looked at her directly. Until you. You make me want things I promised myself I wouldn't risk again. Olivia moved closer. Life without risk isn't really living, James. What about you? He challenged. You're not exactly an open book either. She smiled sadly. My parents' divorce was spectacular in its messiness. Dad cheated with his secretary. Such a cliché. And Mom never recovered. I watched her lose herself in bitterness. I swore I'd never depend on anyone that way. So we're quite the pair, James observed. Both terrified of the same thing. I'm not terrified around you, she admitted. That's what scares me. The confession hung between them, charged with vulnerability. James reached up to trace her cheekbone with his thumb, his eyes intense with longing and fear. Olivia, he whispered, I don't know how to do this. Then stop thinking, she murmured, leaning in to close the distance. Their kiss was different this time, tender, questioning, filled with newly exposed truths. As he lifted her onto the conference table, blueprints scattering beneath them, their usual urgency transformed into something more deliberate. Each touch acknowledged the walls they were dismantling between them. Later, as they lay entwined on the office floor, a throw blanket from the couch providing minimal coverage, James stroked her hair with uncharacteristic gentleness. I think, he said carefully, that this is becoming more than either of us planned. Instead of the panic she expected to feel, Olivia experienced a strange calm. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, cocooning them in their private world for a few moments longer. Both knew that come morning, they would need to decide whether to rebuild their walls or take the terrifying step of leaving them down for good. The coastal cottage was exactly as advertised, rustic, isolated, and perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Wind whipped around them as James unloaded their bags from the car, while Olivia unlocked the weather-beaten blue door. 2 days, James had agreed reluctantly when she proposed the weekend getaway. No work, no distractions, just us figuring out what this is. Now, as they stood in the cozy living room with its panoramic ocean view, the reality of their self-imposed isolation settled in. No blueprints or marketing plans to hide behind. No easy escapes. It's beautiful, James acknowledged, moving to the windows. You chose well. I thought we needed neutral territory, Olivia replied, watching him carefully. Since their revelations in his office the previous week, something had shifted between them. A new awareness that hovered, undefined. That first evening unfolded with surprising ease. They prepared dinner together, discovering a natural rhythm as they moved around the small kitchen. Over wine and pasta, conversation flowed beyond their usual topics of work and architecture. James described his childhood in Portland, raised by a single mother who taught literature at the local college. Olivia shared stories of summers spent at her grandmother's farm in Minnesota, where she'd first discovered her love for storytelling that eventually led to marketing. After dinner, they walked along the beach in the fading light, fingers intertwined. The simplicity of it, this ordinary intimacy, felt more significant than their passionate encounters. I've never brought anyone here before, James admitted as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Here specifically, or anywhere, she clarified. After Alexandra, I kept relationships compartmentalized, he admitted. Olivia squeezed his hand. Thank you for making an exception. Night brought a storm that rattled the cottage windows. In the darkness of the unfamiliar bedroom, their bodies found each other with increasing familiarity. Yet tonight, their lovemaking carried a new tenderness. Unhurried explorations replacing their usual intensity. Stay, she whispered when he moved to leave the bed afterward, his old habit of creating distance asserting itself. Reluctantly, he settled back against the pillows, allowing her to curl against his chest. The next morning, Olivia woke to find James sketching at the small desk by the window, his focus absolute as his pencil moved across the paper. What are you drawing? She asked, wrapping herself in a blanket. He seemed almost embarrassed but turned the sketchbook toward her. It was her, sleeping peacefully among tangled sheets, rendered with delicate precision. I didn't know you could draw like this, she said, genuinely impressed. It's how I fell in love with architecture, through art first. He looked at her with unexpected vulnerability. You're beautiful when you're unguarded. Later, they hiked along the coastal trail, the conversation turning inevitably to what awaited them back in Seattle. The project will be finished in 2 months, James noted. And then? And then what? Olivia pressed when he didn't continue. He stopped walking, facing the vast ocean. I don't know, Olivia. This wasn't in my plans. Life rarely follows plans, she replied. Sometimes it gives you something better. As evening approached on their final day, they sat wrapped in blankets on the porch, watching the tide roll in. James's arm encircled her shoulders, his chin resting atop her head. I think I could get used to this, he admitted quietly. Olivia's heart quickened. To what, exactly? To not being alone. His words were simple but held the weight of a man stepping cautiously across uncertain ground. As they packed the car the next morning, both knew they were bringing back more than they had arrived with. Possibilities neither had dared consider before this weekend. The grand opening of Vantage Tech's headquarters arrived on a perfect Seattle spring day. Olivia stood back, admiring how James's vision had materialized into glass and steel reality. Sustainable elements blended seamlessly with cutting-edge design, creating spaces that felt both innovative and welcoming. Congratulations, she said, finding him alone after the ribbon-cutting ceremony. It's everything we hoped for. We make a good team, he replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The project's completion loomed between them like an unspoken deadline. In the weeks since their coastal retreat, they had fallen into a comfortable routine. Dinners at each other's places, lazy Sunday mornings, even a few social appearances together. Yet neither had dared define what came next. At the celebration party that evening, Olivia watched James from across the room as he accepted compliments from the company executives. He was in his element, professionally triumphant. She couldn't help wondering if he still saw her as part of his future now that their professional connection was concluding. Her answer came later that night. As they walked through the empty building after the guests had departed, James grew increasingly distant, his responses clipped. So this is it, he finally said as they stood in the dramatic glass atrium, the feature they had debated most passionately during planning. Project completed ahead of schedule and under budget. Is that all this was to you? Olivia asked quietly. A project with an end date. James turned away, hands in his pockets. You know it wasn't, but now we need to be realistic. Realistic about what? My firm is bidding on a major project in Chicago. 3 years of work minimum, he spoke to the glass walls rather than to her. I'd need to relocate for at least the first year. Olivia felt her chest tighten. When were you planning to tell me this? I just found out yesterday that we're finalists, he said. Look, Olivia, we never promised each other anything beyond. Don't, she interrupted, anger flaring. Don't reduce what we have to some convenient arrangement. If that's all this was, just say it. His silence was answer enough. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Goodbye, James, she said, turning to leave. Congratulations on your success. 2 weeks passed without contact. Olivia threw herself into work, ignoring concerned glances from colleagues who had grown accustomed to seeing her and James together. She had known from the beginning that he was afraid of commitment, yet had allowed herself to hope anyway. On a rainy Friday evening, she was packing up her office, having accepted a promotion to the company's London branch, when her phone lit up with a text from James, "Meet me at the atrium, please." Against her better judgment, she went. The new building was largely empty, but the atrium was transformed. Tiny lights had been strung across the glass ceiling, mimicking stars. In the center stood James, looking both terrified and determined. I turned down Chicago, he said without preamble. Olivia's breath caught. Why would you do that? Because no building, no matter how prestigious, is worth losing what we found. He stepped closer. I've spent 5 years designing spaces for others to live and work in while keeping my own life empty. James, let me finish, he insisted. You were right at the cottage. Life rarely follows plans. You weren't in my plans, Olivia, but somehow you became the blueprint for everything I want. He reached for her hands. I know you've accepted London. I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking if I can follow. What about your firm? She asked, stunned. We have satellite offices in Europe. I've arranged a transfer. His eyes held her steadily. One night was never going to be enough, Olivia. Neither was one weekend or one project. I think I need a lifetime to get enough of you. Are you sure? She whispered, hardly daring to believe. Instead of answering, he pulled her into a kiss that held all the promise of new beginnings. Passionate yet tender, urgent yet patient. When they finally parted, breathless, he smiled. For an architect, I've been remarkably slow to recognize the foundation we've built. But if you're willing, I'd like to see what we can construct together. Under the artificial stars of the atrium they had created together, Olivia laughed and pulled him back in for another kiss. This time, they both knew it was just the beginning.